To that, Edmund?
Yeah, no, happy to, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I think, again, although it's not captured within obviously the work that's happened to date, the vision around our vision for bus, obviously set out back in 2018 to 2019, sorry, was around, trying to improve all that connectivity as part of an integrated transport system. So cross city, of which obviously we've got the first funded cross city routes for Dudley to Druids Heath, and also in Birmingham City Centre measures there is the start of that improvement alongside Sprint. And obviously, yes, Sprint does improve the east-west connection, which you mentioned there, but it also does set out to improve the north-south connections as well. So Sutton down to South Birmingham, and those are plans which we want to deliver in the future. Obviously, subject to funding. So the plans are there. It's a case of trying to get the relevant funding support now to deliver those aspirations.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. My question is on paragraph 25. Swift flexible on the go. Does that apply to rail, metro, and bus, or just bus and metro? Because I think under the current COVID-19 climate, the future looks like that people won't be working Monday to Friday or 5 or 7 days a week. They'll be working more and more part-time. They'll be working from remotely and probably traveling less. So could we try to come with some sort of deal or Swift card deal where they don't have to pay for a full week when they don't need to travel? So with a view on Swift card to be multimodal and that is more or less applicable on the demand travel rather than a fixed weekly or monthly currently availability at the moment. Thank you.
Yes, Edmund.
No, thanks, Councillor. Again, I'm not going to have the full detail on that, but that is obviously an aspiration. I think it's noted in paragraph 27 as well around that product that's rolled out on Metro to be rolled out onto the bus network. Yes. But happy to take it as an action and feed it back to the head of Swift for a further update as necessary for the member.
I think the post-COVID recovery and future enhancements of the public transport network will take these, interlinked public transport modes and sustainable modes into consideration. In fact, it's a pretty good opportunity just to really make sure that everything fits in and acknowledges the other, shared information, shared ticketing, and some kind of look at the routes and destinations of new destinations of people in the future. Yeah, that's important.
Chair, could I just add a little bit to that as well, because I'm just privy to a little bit of further information that could just help. As is coming up a bit later on the agenda about looking at multimodal aspirations. There is a work stream
put in yesterday, so they're looking at putting a new stent in Tuesday, Wednesday. She's likely to be out Friday.
I think I've just muted one of your colleagues.
Oh no.
There is a proposal to a work stream just to look at that, as you've just mentioned, in light of post-COVID, through not just through the Bus Alliance, but through a multimodal approach to network review, and what potential ticket opportunities are emerging, and how that aligns with the work that Sarah Bayliss brought to the committee last time on customer research and perceptions about times and methods of travel. So all of that, we do expect to start to develop some understanding of the kind of expectations, the kind of ticketing products that we might need to be pushing, not only through the Alliance, but more widely through the organisation and through Swift and through the partnerships with the Grand Rail Collaboration, the Metro Alliance, and the joint operator proposals.
Okay. John, did you wish? Oh no, your hand's down. Diana.
Yes, it's the first time I've used one of these. Have you got a yellow hand telling me, have I done that right?
Yes, you've got your hand up.
We don't use it in our council. At least we've discussed it, I think, but I expect we will. Anyway, I just practice. Not an awful lot, Chair, but I think it's somewhere in the paper. I'm just trying to think. Page 17. It's an obvious remark, but it doesn't. Tackling loneliness by offering a service where people otherwise would not travel under the community transport. What exactly are you doing? I know you've got park and ride and so on. I mean, are you taking calls from people on their own, or what is the service that you're offering? That's all I was concerned. Just the way you're doing it. That's all.
How are community transport doing this?
Yeah.
Page 17.
Yeah. Unless John wants to come in, John.
Yeah, I can just address that one. So they're doing it on a number of ways. I mean, simply the service just being there is one opportunity of addressing loneliness, but also some of the community transport operators are calling their regular users as well, and just engaging with them, see if there's anything they need over and above above travel. I mean, when we were in they're redoing it now, but whilst we've been in lockdown, not only have they been providing transport to get to essential services, but they've also been undertaking shopping trips on their behalf as well, and actually taking shopping to the individual rather than the individual having to go out and go out and potentially put themselves at risk. So that they're doing an awful lot, and particularly the likes of Walsall Community Transport in Coventry, Shenker and the like, and our own ring and ride service, just going that little bit further to offer that additional sort of wraparound care, if you like. And as Chair, as you said, Walsall CT helping out with the current testing in Walsall, and NEAT will also be helping with that from tomorrow as well. So it's just making those vehicles and those drivers and those volunteers available to offer that little bit more support out in the community.
Hey, Chairman, I think that is right. I'm sure there's a balance to be struck here, but there are one or two of us on the committee. We're lonely too, but I mean we've got other things in our life. But there are people out there. We can't do it for everybody, but hats off to those who manage to do it when they're busy taking the buses. So, thank you, Chair.
Yes, there's been a real united and pretty well coordinated effort to make these difficulties just a bit easier for people to cope with.
Well, I mean, everybody knows the big issue in the next 12 months now is going to be the emotional side of having had COVID or not had it or what have you. Whoever you are and whatever group we're in, whatever age we are, it's to my mind the big worry now for going from our children to the schools to adults, everybody. We'll have to see how it goes, and it's got to be a community working together to help people get through post-COVID, if you like. Thanks, I'll shut up.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, well, thanks, Edmund and the rest of you. It is a pretty good summary of what the Bus Alliance is at and how it's had to change and adapt to circumstances, and has, really set the standard, I would say, for this type of coordination, collaboration for the rest of the country. And it's a wonder that the West Midlands is perhaps the best urban transport area for a range of things. So it always was, but it certainly is now under these circumstances. I think your submission to the Select Committee is to be commended as well. And thank you for doing that on everybody's behalf. Right, no more queries. Let's move on to the cycling charter. No need to put your hand up. Oh, there you are.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to share my screen, so hopefully that works.
Is she going first? Go on, then.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm going to share my screen, and you can go ahead.
Well, all right. I won't take too long, Hannah. I always like to try and open it a little bit. If I'm to show up, I know where we're at. And if anything, colleagues, I'm looking at the cycling charter, and I know Hannah's got a very comprehensive report in here, and she'll be giving you a comprehensive response. But in a way, the back two page 41 to 44 shows you a lot about the travel fund and what's happening in your own patches. And I think, like us, most of us realise that there's an awful lot of work did go on through COVID, and we have had, it was 25 million and more, I think, to help try and introduce areas where we can improve cycling, park them more easily in cycle parks at our stations and so on and so forth. I mean, I could go on about it all, but I'm not going to teach you all to suck eggs. But the Emergency Active Travel Fund, which was started off, has worked pretty well to encourage walking and cycling, and of course the safer travel and the streets have also worked quite well with the schools and the better streets, which Solihull got moving on, and I think a lot of you have now. And on the whole, that's another way that's gone through very well indeed. It's very much at the back of the report, which is very down to earth and shows you everything really. But there is an increase in cycling, and I think that's good to see. I mean, the weather's now getting a bit grotty. But Hannah, I'm not going to steal your thunder. I had written a bit out, but I know you've got it all put together. So I'm going to over to you, please, Hannah, because she does a marvelous job. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hall-Allen. So I prepared a little report for you, presentation rather, for you today, as there's quite a bit in the report, and I thought I'd pick up a few of the highlights. And obviously, cycling and walking has been raised in profile recently, with many people taking up cycling and walking for their daily exercise. So hopefully, I don't think that's switched yet. There we go. So in an effort to bring together all the plans in the, in the region together, we've sort of brought it all together as a single network called the Starley Network, which was launched back in August, which feels like a lifetime ago now. So the map is currently being updated to take into account the active travel fund schemes, which we'll be delivering shortly. And we're also going to have more of an interactive version where you can zoom in on the map a little bit more closely. So this is just more of a static map that's stylized. But we've brought all the visions together into one, and just to have a bit more of a coherent plan, which includes the local cycling walking infrastructure plans as well, not only for the West Midlands, but for the local authorities who've developed them as well. We are currently working on delivering the cycling walking program of the Transporting Cities Fund. This includes the Better Streets Community Fund schemes, which Councillor Hall-Allen had mentioned, and development of the infrastructure schemes listed here, as well as the West Midlands Cycle Hire, which is being delivered imminently. So from one fund to the next, back in May, government announced 250 million of the 2 billion that was previously announced for cycling and walking to be made immediately. And this new fund was to help people cycle and walk more in light of the pandemic and movement restrictions, to encourage people to stay active through cycling and walking, and to release some of the pressure on public transport and avoid overcrowding. This funding was released in two tranches. The first was approximately 3.8 million for the West Midlands, and this table shows a breakdown of how this was allocated across the region. This was done on a per capita basis, and we, for tranche one, received about 400K more than what was originally allocated, because we had an application that was particularly strong. So this map highlights where some of those schemes were delivered. DFT guidance was that the schemes needed to be delivered within 8 weeks of receiving the funding. We delivered 57 capital schemes, delivering 24 miles of cycle routes, as well as safe spaces for walking on High Street and town centres. We also delivered a supporting measures package, which included travel support for businesses and students, media campaigns, cycle parking for organizations, social prescribing, and an engagement platform called Commonplace, which we're going to continue to use for our engagement during tranche 2. As we know, there have been quite some vocal views on cycling and walking schemes. But as you can see from our post-delivery surveys, the majority of respondents actually felt quite positive about the delivery of these schemes, which is in line also with surveys conducted by DFT, which showed approximately 2/3 of respondents across the country felt positively towards low traffic neighborhoods. This is also in line with our own Bike Life West Midlands report, which showed that 64% of residents would like to see fewer motor vehicles on their roads, and 65% supported building more infrastructure, even if that meant less room for traffic. In November 2020, Tranche 2 was announced by DFT with significant more guidance, including engagement and consultation with relevant stakeholders, as well as having significant monitoring and evaluation. Those in receipt of this fund needed to publish an engagement plan, which TFWM have done and is available on the website as is linked in the report. We've been engaging with the bus team and regular monthly catch-ups to ensure that they are kept aware of the progress of development. So we're taking this engagement quite seriously and have developed plans. I should note that in terms of the fund, we had received 5% less than we had originally been allocated, and this amount was covered by TCF uncommitted funding and the ATF contingency. So we're continue to be committed to engage with stakeholders, especially in these difficult times. With engagement forced online for the most part, there will be an offline option either via email or phone. So these are the locations of the infrastructure package that we'll be delivering, and we also have a supporting measures package as well. And we're now in the early stages of development and mobilization. So moving on from active travel fund to the Commonwealth Games, they will be here before we know it, and we want to capitalize on this opportunity to make a significant change and develop a legacy for cycling. So we're currently working on a proposal called Cycling for Everyone, which is aimed at the most deprived communities in the region. There has been and continues to be an investment in capital and infrastructure, and this package will offer supporting measures and behavior change interventions to people who are less likely to benefit from this investment in cycling due to barriers such as bike ownership or lack of skills in cycling. In terms of free bikes, it will form part of the offer as well in a balanced way, but isn't the core of the offer. The focus itself is the audience, the deprived communities in the region, and so it will be community-led and evidence-based. And in terms of walking, this is being addressed in the active environments work stream, which is led by Simon Hall at WMCA, which will be looking at making spaces where physical activity can take place, such as an active street. I'd like to report on some of our data. So we have continued to measure cycling levels across the region. And as you can see, there was a huge peak in the middle of the last lockdown. And while we see that the levels have trailed off a little bit, they're still higher than this time last year. Based on the end of last quarter when this report was submitted. Obviously, with the snow, this will impact levels in January, which is expected with changes in weather. We're also looking to install 21 new cycle counters across the network to improve our data collecting capacity. Cycle parking has definitely taken a hit during lockdown and COVID movement restrictions, with many people working from home. We'll see if quarter four sees another slight increase. You can see it kind of steadily increases over the quarters, although we're definitely not hitting the sort of the usual 25 to 27% that we normally get. But we have had a little bit of a rising trend. Cycle to crime at stations has also been at its lowest, with 66 thefts recorded, which is a decrease from 139 recorded over the same time period of last year. In terms of our active travel partnerships, we have partnerships with Living Street, Cycling UK, and British Cycling. There are currently 32 community cycle clubs in the region with Cycling UK. Cycling UK have also delivered Big Bike Revival to support key workers earlier in 2020. 146 of 785 total schools have taken part in the Walk to School program offered by Living Streets, and British Cycling have delivered 138 community-led rides with 650 participants. And we see that this is crucial to getting an increase in cycling, and obviously some of this is now limited with our current lockdown, but we'll pick this back up as soon as we are able to. In terms of school streets, they're being delivered in 3 local authorities now, with Walsall delivering several as part of their Active Travel Fund program as well. So that brings me to the bottom of the report, and I'm happy to take questions. This picture was taken from a while ago when we can get out and enjoy the outdoors with other people. Mm-hmm. So I will turn my screen on so you can see me as well.
Okay.
Hello.
Did you want to add anything, Diana?
Well, no, not really. It's very thorough. I mean, I think, forgive me if I've missed it. I don't think I did. But there has been quite a lot, if you look on page 35, about bike sharing and where we're getting them available from now, and the different types of bike. I mean, Rich is very keen on trying to help people with disabilities, and I think this has gone a little way to help people in this way, which is a very good thing. And the cycle crime, I'm afraid, is still a certain amount being pinched, unfortunately. I think you mentioned, didn't you, the D-locks that have been available at New Street Travel, although I think the travel centre at the moment there is closed, so they won't be able to get them either way. There's a lot of good going on, Chair, but I think people, the graph that she showed you, when you look back in May, all of a sudden a lot of people did go onto the bikes and walked. And I'm sad, really, because it's actually, with respect, Hannah, gone down quite a bit, which is not what we want. And my job is supposed to be, with your guidance and help and support, and indeed this committee's, to encourage it. And I'm not quite sure if we're ever going to get anywhere as near as we'd like. But mustn't give up. I don't want to be doom and gloom, but I think I have to be a bit realistic as the chair of this group. That's all I'm going to say, Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
We worked hard. Sorry.
I picked up Mary, Tim, Linda, so far, Mary, and then Shamil.
That was very very thorough, very interesting. While I'm in support of more people walking and cycling, there has been some flack about some of the measures, and I believe there is a large survey, about 20,000, against this, because this is something that's going on across the UK, not UK, England anyway. Also, I want to find out more about school streets as well. When will more of them, because I've applied for a couple of the schools in my ward, to do that, because they definitely want to do it. And that's about all, really.
Okay, thank you. Let's take the first three, then Anna can respond. Tim's next.
Thanks very much, Chair. First of all, can I thank Diana for presenting her report, as was previously commented, very thorough. So thank you very much. It's nice to see the levels of investment from the government as outlined in the report. The report mentions the £23 million of Transforming Cities Fund. The report also mentions the almost £17 million over 2 tranches of the Emergency Active Travel Fund. So it's really nice to see, almost £40 million invested across all the different projects from those two funds, in terms of both pre-COVID and as an emergency response to COVID. The one question I do have, and I raised this at Birmingham Transport Scrutiny last week and didn't seem to get a very satisfactory answer, is that Transforming Cities Fund is there to, quote, develop and deliver a cycling and walking infrastructure programme. And I just don't understand how Transforming Cities Fund monies can be allocated to the restoration of a water feature in Victoria Square in Birmingham, because I would have thought that money should be put into, as the report says, delivering cycling and walking infrastructure programmes. And I just wondered if any officer had any views on that and how it could be allocated. Thank you very much, Chair.
And the third one, Linda.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'm referring particularly to the slide called Cycling for Everyone. And I very much welcome the easing of ways for people to walk and to cycle. Not being a driver myself, I really welcome it. However, in some ways, it seems to benefit people in the more open areas where there are already more facilities for people to get outside and enjoy the outside air. I'm thinking particularly of canals, and just recently we've had a wonderful refurbishment of our canal towpath from Longford, which is my ward, all the way into the city centre, which is absolutely great. However, canals by their very nature are almost invisible. From the street, they're invisible. So how we persuade people to put themselves into a position where they don't feel very safe is going to be difficult. My second point was that in many of the areas where we've got huge health inequalities, the very built up areas in our cities where there is most poverty and most health inequality, added to the government's wish for us to build more and more houses, and thus each small pocket of land in these already built up areas being filled with more houses, it seems that the very people who need the health benefits of walking and cycling are denied it because the infrastructure is not there. So I don't know how we work in the future with our planning departments and with our government to ensure that there is room made for walking and cycling, and that there is room for people in the most deprived areas of our city to actually get out on a bike and get out on a bike or walk safely. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Tim's question, Mary's question first. The school streets.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm just looking through my notes and going back. So definitely there has been a lot of pushback against some of the schemes, and we need to work carefully with our communities to ensure that the benefits are communicated well, and that we do amend schemes as best as possible so that we can meet everyone's needs, but still put in the infrastructure that makes it safer to cycle and walk. So in terms of the pushback, we have engagement plans, and there'll be consultation in place as well. But in terms of the school streets, you asked when will they be delivered? Can I ask what? Sorry, I really don't know, but what ward you're in, and I can look into whether there's going to be any there.
I'm in Sturchley ward.
Sturchley, okay.
Particularly for Scottish School.
Yeah. Okay, I will ask, and I'll take that as an action.
Right, Tim's questions.
So Tim's question was on the TCF being used for the public space in city centre. I'm all in terms of the cycling and walking program, the TCF that's allocated is specifically for the schemes mentioned in the table. So anything outside of that would have to be addressed towards the officers delivering that program, whatever program that is part of.
If I can just come in there. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Hannah. On the question, Councillor Huxtable, about TCF, Hannah's absolutely right. So the allocation that was agreed for cycling and walking is ring fence for that. The allocation as part of TCF1 and what was approved by Combined Authority Board in November 2018 included a range of other projects, which included BCC Public Realm and the fountain restoration, etc., is part of that wider public realm strategy for Birmingham City Centre. So that's where that is being funded from.
Thank you. Is that all of Tim's points addressed?
He addressed that it was nice to see that there has been funding allocated from government towards cycling and walking, and that was so. Okay. Yes, good. It is. I agree.
I'll take you one by one in future. Linda's question.
Yeah. So she asked about meeting the sort of having infrastructure for cycling and walking in the areas which are most deprived in the region. So we do have local cycling walking infrastructure plans for strategic routes in the West Midlands, and several of the local authorities have local cycling walking infrastructure plans, which are, so if you think of those as arteries, so the kind of like the little veins that go into them and the little capillaries that go into them. And many of these do go through the most deprived areas as well. Also in terms of the cycling for everyone, one of the legacy will be an engaged community that's more in tune with what is happening with, with their neighborhoods and their streets, and can feed into that more widely.
Okay, I've got Chairman, I've got Ted, I've got Pervez. I'll draw a line under it there. Diana, did you want to come in at the end?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. My question is that we have to do a lot of work in emergency for cycling and walking without proper consultation with the stakeholders or the local residents. Now, will there be any evaluation to either to remove the infrastructure or make it permanent? Because we don't end up with something there, infrastructures, which are not needed or not being used. It'll be wasteful resources and wasteless space. Secondly, Chair, I want to echo what Linda Bigham was saying, that at the moment, as part of planning PPD guidance, any development is required to provide space for cycle racks, but nothing for cycling infrastructure. So I think we need to lobby for the change in PPE regulations, that any new developments must include cycling and walking infrastructures to have a joint up strategy for walking and cycling. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Right. Okay. Is it a response to Chairman, please?
Sorry, I needed to unmute myself. Thank you, Chair. In terms of your first question, there is a monitoring and evaluation plan that is required as part of the Active Travel Fund, and DFT have sent guidance through, so they will be evaluated post delivery of scheme 6 months out and 12 months out. And this does include surveys and answering questionnaires, and DFT will send more information on the evaluation component. So the answer to your question is yes, they will be evaluated. And then your comment on developments requiring not only sort of cycle storage, but also and parking, but also the infrastructure. I'm aware that there are planning documents for various developments, and we do comment on them, and to ensure that links up to active travel is also included.
Okay, thank you. Ted.
Thank you, Chairman. I just thought the committee might be interested to know the progress on Solihull's walking and cycling strategy. We've recently gone out for public consultation. We had a very good response in that we had 65 email responses. We did conduct 3 webinars, which 75 people took part in. We had over 1,500 comments on Twitter and over 28,000 on Facebook. So we were pleased with that response and some very constructive comments, which we'll now take to how we're going to further evaluate our particular strategy in Solihull, which I think is good news.
Excellent. Right, thank you. Oh, well, that's great. Pervez.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very good report, very informative report, Chair. But I want to say to my colleagues, and especially to Tim, sir, yes, the government is funding this, and I welcome this. But don't forget, it is not the Tory government money; it's the taxpayers' money, and they are funding it. So let me make this very clear. And second thing is, it is well. I mean, she can laugh, but it is a fact that this government has underfunded West Midlands as far as physical infrastructure is concerned, social infrastructure is concerned. For last 10 years, we had austerity, and they have underfunded us on every area. So let that be on the record. Now, on my question, I mean, in our country, especially in England, Cambridge City has done it with bicycles, because you can see visibly how they have promoted their cycling and their infrastructure. And I think something like 30%, I might be wrong, officers can tell me, but it's a very visible site. If you go to Cambridge, and you will see people using cycling throughout the city. Now on page 38, 6.2, if you see it, the officers made it very clear, as Linda pointed out, and it was a very, very valid question. It says, it is also worth noting that active travel modes such as cycling are not an easy option for a number of vulnerable groups due to affordability, accessibility, fear of safety, cultural and lifestyle barriers, and fear of theft. And then it goes further on that funding is allocated to remove barriers to cycling, real and perceived. That is the task now for us, that how we are going to get the vulnerable groups, the deprived groups in deprived areas, how are we going to bring them in, how are we going to communicate with them, how are we going to publicize that cycling and walking not only good for health, because once again I remind my colleagues, most of our areas in the West Midlands, there are parts of our cities even where people die 10 years younger than well-off areas. And cycling and active travel can help us to close the gap. But once again, it is lack of funding from the government in all areas that we have deaths in our country, in our cities, some areas 10 years younger than other areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think I'd love to have as much per capita as the South East, I must say, spent on transport. However, okay, Diana.
Well, I'm sorry, Chairman.
You could probably answer that point as well.
I'm really sorry. But I mean, at the end of the day, Pervez, oh, I'm so sorry. All the money that's gone into Coventry, let alone Birmingham. I've never heard such rubbish. And with the greatest respect, of course, I'm sure Ted and I speak to him as well. We're very proud of the Solihull Borough. It's a fabulous place, but no means perfect. And we do have deprived areas. Ask you, give me the answers to getting to deprived areas, and we will. And I think with the greatest respect to this report and to Hannah, myself, and Richardson, and the youth, and yourself for that matter, Chair, we do look at this very seriously. We are trying all the time to get monies available that come to us in the right areas. We're trying to make the roads down the canals safer so that we can get people down there. We're trying to improve people on different types of cycle, and we've got another thing in a few minutes. Anyway, you've definitely built up my blood pressure, Pervez. Well done, you. And I really think, of course, all the money comes from the taxpayer, probably the higher ones in the end, but you wouldn't like me saying that either, would you? Because we don't possibly tax them enough, but that's a bit political now. May the 6th, here we come, we'll see what happens. But I do want to say, Chairman, I actually do think on this committee, I mean, all we're doing is noting what's being done. Other people make decisions. It's very frustrating, but at the end of the day, I think we're all trying our best to get the best out of things, and I'm certainly doing that as chairman of this group. So we do try and help people who are not as able or even as fortunate financially as others. Thank you, Chairman. My case.
Well, that was a longer discussion than I'd expected, but it's good to see discussion on cycling. We just do with them getting rid of some of the hills in the West Midlands to encourage more people onto bicycles. Anyway, do we know?
Excuse me, coming back to you, Mum. You know, the graph shows it's gone right down again. We keep on trying.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't fancy cycling up up Spring Hill or some of the areas near me because of the effort required. However, never mind safety. Right. Can we move on? Is that noted, please?
Yeah. Is there any way?
It is noted.
Come on now. Pervez, you've had your time now. Let's move on to item 10. The power guide update. Now, this rests with the Rail and Metro Lead Members Group, with certainly Richard and myself coming in from our particular portfolio angles. Roger.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a very good report in terms of telling us exactly where we are. It's obviously not so good in terms of exactly where we are. The fall off in usage is hardly surprising. It certainly reflects the drop in use of rail and to a lesser extent metro over the COVID period. Now, in terms of our strategy for getting people back onto public transport, I suggest that we really need to focus about a Hearts and Minds campaign. The park and rides will continue to be there, will continue to operate in the way they always have. I don't think we need to be looking at any particularly radical changes. I think the scheme we introduced of the booking clearly has been pushed back in terms of its opportunity. But again, when usage picks up, there may be some interest in resuscitating or reviving that. But you know, it is what it is. That's where we are, and there's a huge job for us to do, a wider job in terms of promoting use of public transport. It's great to see some ideas and schemes coming through for bus park and ride, which you haven't had so much in the past, and the scheme in here, the Minworth scheme, very welcome. But you know, it ain't going to be the be all and end all of transforming the usage. We know we're going to have some difficult times ahead of us, and I think it's a real challenge for us. We need an overarching strategy to deal with that, of which park and ride, frankly, is really rather part rather than all of the strategy. But thanks to Babs for the report. I don't know whether you want to add anything to it.
Okay, thanks. Babs.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Lawrence. I'm happy to give a quick overview if that's helpful, or just take questions. If just in terms of a quick overview, then just section 3, as Councillor Lawrence says, just outlines the COVID-19 impacts on current park and ride usage, and the figure 1 on page 50 it shows occupancy of park and ride during the sort of key stages of COVID-19, including times when lockdown's been sort of stronger or lighter over the past year. During the lighter restrictions, we've seen average occupancies of around 21%, and during the latest lockdown, we're seeing around 12.5% occupancy, which is obviously very different to what we're used to seeing, which is much closer to 100% as outlined on table 2. The highest occupancy we've seen really across the state as a whole is 28%. Some sites, especially smaller ones or those in local centres, have been a bit busier, but generally there's still more than enough capacity to cater for demand. In terms of projects, Longbridge is complete. We've just got a few final snagging items ongoing, but nothing that would prevent us from opening the car park. But because of the current lockdown restrictions, car parking availability nearby and operational cost considerations, we've made a decision to leave it closed now until such a time when demand would sort of require it to open. In terms of sort of point 4.8, it just outlines that we've put a lot of development of park and ride expansion on hold at the moment, because we want to understand more about how we recover from COVID-19 and taking into account funding constraints. We obviously don't want to be spending a lot of money developing schemes if they might not be the right initiatives to take forward in the future. So we'll be reassessing that as we understand more about COVID and our recovery going forwards. That said, we're still working with Coventry on an outline business case for Tile Hill, and that's procurement process is ongoing for that piece of work at the moment. As Councillor Lawrence said, we've been looking at potential opportunities for park and ride in Minworth, a bus-based site. Thanks to some funding from Midlands Connect, we've been looking at land options, and we'll be doing some demand analysis work to understand what kind of demand for such a service would be. And we're continuing just to work with officers across all the boroughs to look at potential options for park and ride in the future. For example, we're working with Solihull, looking at their recently published draft local development plan and how that might impact on demand for parking at locations like Whitlock's End. And we're continuing to feed into the railway station schemes that are being developed at the moment, for example, Willenhall and Darlaston. As a lot of the kind of expansion developments on hold, we're focusing our time on looking at how we can get the most out of the park and ride estate for the region and our customers and our communities, and how it can also assist the combined authority and the region in recovering from COVID. One of the things we're keen to do is strengthen the data we receive on park and ride to see how we can use that to inform how we improve customer experience and information, encourage more sustainable travel where it's a viable option for people, understand where we should be looking to expand or invest in park and ride, looking at initiatives like booking options and electric vehicle charging, informing how we undertake asset management and supporting wider transport operations and network management. In terms of electric vehicle charging, we're doing a piece of work at the moment with a company called Cenex to establish a strategy for the rollout of electric vehicle charge points across the park and ride estate to help support that area of work and the increased electric vehicle ownership we're seeing. We also are working to make sure a number of leases that expire in the next 18 months are taken forward, and that we're going through the implications and opportunities of that. We're continuing to work with Sustainable Travel Team to encourage sustainable travel to park and ride, and as Hannah outlined, there are potential opportunities there where we've seen increases in walking and cycling due to the pandemic, and we're also supporting the team with the bike share initiative that's being rolled out. I know Councillor Lawrence touched on Saverspace, the reservation system, and as he quite rightly pointed out, that hasn't really been utilised at the moment as there's significant availability across park and ride, so it's of no benefit to people to book a space. But we are considering if there's any opportunities as to how Saverspace could help in COVID recovery by giving passengers more confidence to travel when they want to, so maybe when trains or trams are quieter. And also whether there's any added value services we could add to the app, such as better information about disruption or travel information. And as we've reported previously, we had been requested to explore options to look at how we could potentially offset or recoup some of the significant operational costs of park and ride to the combined authority and the taxpayer through revenue raising opportunities, and that could include exploring the potential options and implications of car park charging, but that has also been placed on hold so we can understand more about the pandemic recovery and ensure that any work in this area is fully informed and it's reflective of the latest situation.
Okay, thank you. Now, Pervez, I thought you were the first, but have you just left your hand up from previous item?
Yes, Chair, sorry.
Right, Tim.
Thank you very much, Chair. My first comment is that I'm sure every officers put into report a deliberate mistake to see if I actually read the reports or not.
Oh.
And on the table of usage under Lee Hall, how can you have 0.2 of a car? I think that's the deliberate error to see if we actually read the reports.
Ooh.
Unless
I'm
very much mistakes. But my serious points are yeah. My serious points are in no particular order. I also welcome the report. I think it's a really, really good report, and thank Babs for compiling it. I think that we need to look more at multimodal park and ride. So, for example, where there's a bus and a railway station, or a bus and a metro stop, co-located. we look at providing park and ride for both those. And when I say bus, I also include bus rapid transit. In terms of the Birmingham clean air zone, because I've always said that air quality is something we must do something about across the West Midlands. Any surplus funding from the clean air zone, how are we approaching Birmingham City Council to say, well, look, if we invest some of that surplus funding in park and rides and development in a post-COVID world, when hopefully rail demand and park and ride demand actually recovers fully, can we stop cars on the outer edge of Birmingham and other locations across the West Midlands to stop car travel inside the ring road in Birmingham, which contributes significantly to poor air quality and poor air pollution levels? Because the cabinet members indicated he would be welcome to have those discussions about use of surplus funding from the air zone. And Babs also mentions the park and ride of the two proposed railway stations along the reopened Walsall to Wolverhampton route at Willenhall and Darlaston. Very supportive of that. But we're also proposing to reopen the Camp Hill line, and the three proposed new stations, none of them have park and ride facilities. There's drop and ride, but not park and ride, and which means that the only station on the entire proposed new Camp Hill line route with park and ride facilities is going to be Kings Norton, because it's an existing station, and that's going to be the terminus. And are we looking at potential increased demand in and around Kings Norton? As the chair indicated, she did mention it at the Combined Authority board meeting in January, Kings Norton railway station. And I think that's going to be a significant hub in the future for rail travel, and there will be a increased demand that we need to start planning for. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Huxtable, and apologies for the 13.2 car typo first and foremost, and a good spot. In terms of exploring more options for multimodal park and ride, absolutely. It's something that we're keen to do. We've actually undertaken a piece of strategic work at the moment looking at how we can improve or set out a strategy, if you like, for bus-based park and ride to try and make it more effective in the West Midlands, by using some best practice from other areas of the country where there are really successful schemes like Oxford and Leeds, for example. But, embracing those opportunities where people have the option of multimodal travel, absolutely spot on. And we'll be working with John's team on bus and the rail team and of course Metro to see what opportunities there are as we, look at how the network evolves out of COVID-19. In terms of the clean air zone, I completely agree. I think what Park and Ride does is offer a really viable alternative to driving into the city centre for people, and we are keen to explore funding options for that, and we will definitely speak to the City Council about whether there are any avenues to support that through the revenue raised through the clean air zone. In terms of the Camp Hill line, I know that there are lots of challenges in terms of providing park and ride at the new stations along that line, not least land availability, which is incredibly challenging. There may be and probably will be an increased pressure, I suppose, on wider park and ride facilities. Obviously, we've got a brand new 620 space facility opening at Longbridge, which is sort of 2 stops down from Kings Norton, on the Cross City line, and that might help to distribute demand on the Cross City line, which might help free up some capacity at Kings Norton. But we will we are considering our options for park and ride expansion on a flexible basis, and looking in a structured way at how we can expand in the right places for the right reasons, and obviously where there might be increases in demand, such as due to the reopening of rail lines, we'll make sure that that's a key consideration as we consider where to focus investment going forward.
Okay, thank you. Sandeep, did you want to add something?
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to the comments that that Babs has made, and Councillor Huxtable does pick up some very pertinent points, and I think this is where signposting back to the overall park and ride strategy, the focus is very much around how do we intercept car trips at the most appropriate locations on the network. That helps us remove some of those longer distance car trips from the network altogether. So that's got to be an overriding factor in some of the work going forwards, but also picking up wider access to some of our railway stations. And as we know, we've had a big change recently as a result of COVID, but we have seen increases in cycling and walking, and therein lies an opportunity to consider other access arrangements and other access opportunities to some of our local stations and the rail network as a whole, to encourage those people back. But it was just to reinforce the point really that yes, the multimodal thing is very, very important as well, but we do need to look at this very much within the framework established by the park and ride strategy.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments? Wow. Okay, well, this is an ongoing matter, a combined authority strategy. Do we note that? Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you, Babs. That was a well appreciated report and update.
Thank you, Chair.
We now have item 11, a presentation on e-scooters. Mark Collins.
Yeah, good
There you
afternoon,
are.
Chair.
Hello, Mark.
Hello. I'm just going to share my screen if that's okay. Hopefully everybody can see that okay. So yeah, so good afternoon and thank you, Chair. I've got here just a quick overview of sort of the past history of where we've come from, and also a current status as well. And then there'll be time obviously for questions after that too. So I'll just give a brief overview of where we've come from. So this for us started back in spring as a response to COVID. And I think when we briefed previously this committee, we went through where we'd got to in terms of our procurement exercise. We went with a regional approach and nominated Voi as a single operator in the West Midlands. So that was planned so that we had a trial commence in the September of this year. And as I said, that sort of operated across the region. And then we've been working with the regions to do individual deployments as we go. So in terms of launches and what happened from September onwards, we initially launched in Birmingham and also Coventry. And there were some initial teething problems, and those have sort of been catalogued around what happened in Coventry, and there was a suspension for a period of time. I'm pleased to say, though, that we are now back up and running in a sort of concentrated trial in and around the University of Warwick in Coventry, with a view to expand as well. But as of today, we're operating in 3 areas. There's an expanded trial that's currently operating in Birmingham. There is a trial in Sandwell, and as I say, there's a trial also operating around that University of Warwick campus. So those are the 3 that are up and running at the moment. And actually, it's been a very interesting learning exercise in trying to work through some of the issues that we've seen. And as one of the first regions to deploy these scooters, actually the lessons learned here have transferred over to other areas as well. So it's actually been quite a national effort in trying to sort of improve our learning across the country. And then just some key stats of where we've got to. So a lot of numbers on here, but I can try and contextualize some of these as well. So this is a summary of all the stats from across the 3 regions that I mentioned. Birmingham has been going the longest, and it's probably got the largest amount of both riders, rides and distance travelled. To put it into context, in terms of distance travelled, that's about 4.5 times around the world. And most of that has been done in Birmingham. Birmingham is currently running about a 35 square kilometre sort of area. And Sandwell and University of Warwick are sort of about 3 and also 1 square kilometre respectively. So you can sort of see that's quite a concentrated amount of mileage in quite a small area. The number of sort of rides and equally the average distance for each of those rides is on here as well. So we're sort of seeing an average around just over 1.5 kilometres per ride. Voi have been quite proactive in the space of either handing out free rides as part of their inclusivity schemes, and they've also been working with the NHS regionally as well to try and help NHS workers get to work, and that's been quite a successful scheme both here and across the UK. And also there's with the ambassadors that are on street managing the scheme, they've actually created quite a few jobs regionally as well. So it's actually been quite a good news story around. And I'm pleased also to report that throughout the duration of the trial, we haven't had any recognised serious injuries at all across the patch, which is good. And actually is quite unique. A lot of the other areas have had 1 or 2 serious injuries, and we so far haven't had anything to report in that space. So that's good news. Just also a quick overview of what Voi are doing. So this is a moving target, and where we started to where we are now is quite different in terms of both some of the features on the scooters themselves and also some of the aligned research activities as well. So some of the features on the scooters, such as number plates, were instigated first here in the West Midlands. We've also got things like indicators coming on stream in the next month or so. And there's a huge amount of work that's gone on in the background around GPS mapping, making sure the scooters are doing exactly what they should be doing at any given location. And the fidelity that we've now got with the GPS is far and above what we started with. So that's been a real success story and helped us really control how the scheme is progressing across the region. It's also worth noting that the Voi have started and are also in process with a number of research programmes working, for example, with the RNIB and University of Warwick around what sort of auditory elements are required for the scooters to improve that sort of inclusivity element and improve the life of pedestrians. Voi previously had employed local police on overtime to help sort of marshal some of the early phases of the work, but I'm pleased to report also that the police have got to the point now where actually their presence is no longer required and they feel that the scheme is well controlled. We've also got some further work ongoing with sort of the providers, and there's also some research activity that's sort of in scope as well, looking at air quality, etc. So there's a lot of work that's ongoing that really tries to build on the knowledge and the understanding really of how these scooters sort of work within an ecosystem of other transport measures. So these couple of slides really just reflect also the boundary conditions and where the geofences exist. So this was where we started in Birmingham in September with a smallish fleet of around 100 scooters. I can now report that we are in a much larger area. So this is the 35 square kilometres that we're currently operating the scheme in. And there's discussions ongoing now about how we can maybe link up some of the areas that we have in and around Sandwell and also Birmingham to really get to grips with delivering on some of the trip chains that we're sort of noticing as part of this activity. It's also worth saying that we're doing a huge amount of monitoring and evaluation across the scheme. Not only is that happening on a national level with the DFT, but we're also doing a regional element as well that's linked into the Future Transport Zone programme. So we're very consciously looking at how people are using these scooters, what type of journeys are being used. Initial study work that we've got looks to suggest that we're taking about 20% of what were car journeys off the road and actually onto scooters. So that's sort of a positive thing. The average from other schemes in other countries suggests it's between sort of 14 and 16%. So we might be a little bit ahead. So we want to monitor that closely and see if we can push that still further. And this is the Sandwell trial, as I mentioned, with a view to sort of expand this out and see if we can connect the two zones together and almost along the corridor of where the metro runs. This is operating a smaller fleet. So this is only 50 scooters as it stands at the minute. And really, both Voi and Sandwell would like to see what expansion possibilities exist with it to try and sort of boost the scheme as it stands. And then we've also got the University of Warwick trial. So this really was born out of the conversations and where we ended up with Coventry last year. We wanted a more isolated trial to sort of kickstart the Coventry element again. Going really well, even though there's a limited number of students on site at the moment. Actually, the patronage is really quite high. We're over 1,000 kilometres ridden in less than a month in a 1 square kilometre area, so it's a significant use. And there's real value here in expanding this out in iterative small steps to sort of get us back to an area which actually gives a lot of value to a lot of people, and that sort of work in progress, and as we'll see that develop hopefully over the next sort of couple of months. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the scheme and where we've got. There's as I said, there's plenty of other detail that I can share, or happy to field any questions.
Okay, thank you for the update. Are there any follow-ups or questions? No? Going? Oh, Diana, thank you. Sorry, you need to turn yourself on.
Sorry, ma'am. Sorry, I'm here. Yeah, I didn't want to feel a wasted time because it's very, very interesting. And I've just at the end you were talking about Warwick and the University of Warwick, isn't it?
Yeah.
And obviously being very used at the moment. But at our last discussion about bikes, we were discussing. I think one of the members talked about Cambridge and Oxford. My goodness me, where there are a lot of students, there often are a lot of bikes and so on. So I think if I saw it just now a second ago, that you haven't had too many accidents. Was that relating to the students going into to the Warwick University, which is on the edge of Coventry anyway, isn't it, or in that direction? Or is, in other words, have you not really got moving yet with electric bikes? I mean, is it a stat for now, or because you're quite right? I mean, there isn't much work going on there until they're not back, are they? They're not back again. So, but when they were, how was it working for the students in that area? Because I would imagine it may catch on, I would have thought.
So yeah, so the current number of students on site is just below 2,000. Normally they're sort of 5 or 6 times that. So they do have a lot of international students that are resident there over Christmas. So that hence why we wanted to get a scheme in there, almost to sort of kickstart the programme. So it's worthwhile saying there have been no serious incidents across both the University of Warwick scheme and the other elements that are running across the region as well. So we've managed to sort of manage that quite well. The university do have a resident bike sharing scheme, which is separate to the regional one that's been set up. So there's conversations ongoing about how to sort of coalesce the two. What they have noticed is, and this is a question that crops up a lot, is what interaction exists between a bike share scheme and a scooter scheme? Do they cannibalise each other? And I think the evidence so far, and it's only really been a month's worth of running, and the weather's been bad, they haven't necessarily seen too much of a difference between the bike share scheme that's incumbent and the e-scooter scheme which is being running live. So it'll be really interesting when the students are back in a few months' time about how those two play out. And that's certainly something we're conscious to understand as the scheme in Coventry for the regional scheme expands.
Well, thank you. I think it's very interesting. And as I say, it's something all new. It's all new to me. But I'm trying to get my head around it because it's here to stay, as I see it. Gosh, 6,000 students, the mind boggles. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other points that you wish to raise, members? No? Oh, Linda.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Sorry I'm late. It was something that arose while the discussion was going on, and it is with reference to Warwick University. What I'm trying to resolve is the tension between e-scooters and getting people to walk and bicycle, and the health benefits of the walking and the bicycling as against using the e-scooters. And I just wonder how much the area will prove typical in that, knowing the university site, it's not often driven around. It's driven to and it's driven from, but it's not driven around. So I don't quite understand how the project at Warwick fits in with the project as a whole as being typical of an area where e-scooters might be useful. Thank you.
I think it's a fair point. I think there's some uniqueness to the campus style area that we've sort of gone for. Part of this was to show that the scooters could sort of re-establish themselves in Coventry. So that was one element, and it was a relatively secured element in which we could run the trial for a period of time. There's another piece of work that we're doing through the Future Transport Zone at the University of Warwick that is looking at sort of wider travel behaviour. So we're interested in having scooters as part of the modal mix in that trial element to understand how that sort of mode is interoperable with other modes. So there's that other element as well. And we also know there's quite a few use cases where students will get taxis or other rather unsustainable forms to go from their accommodation block to places like Tesco, which is the other side of campus, to go shopping. And there's quite a lot of instances of that. So we do think there's some use cases whereby we want to stop students doing unsustainable things, whereas they could have previously walked, but they're not going from one half of campus to the other. So there are some specifics to you're right, and that's really why we're trying to push this as a program beyond the confines of the campus, and so that we can look to attach ourselves to some of the trips that exist that are sort of half a mile. Tile Hill's only a sort of mile away. Then you've got other stations as well that are quite close. So hence why there's almost a springboard element to starting the trial there.
Thank you, Chair.
When will the Warwick University scheme commence fully?
So that's been running since the 12th of January. It's been running for a few weeks already. The intention to expand would be from middle of February. We're just waiting for approval from Coventry for that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or points you wish to raise? Okay, well, thank you. I'm sure we'll be returning to this from time to time as time goes on, but I will be checking with Rolf, the Warwick University CAT, to see how he's coping with this, because he's actually run over by a car 2 years ago, and he's been very, very conscious of the need for road safety ever since. However, we'll see how he gets on. Okay, well, thank you, Mark. Thank you. Let's move on then. Now, I don't want to run out of time here, but item 12 is a presentation from Andrew Purchase, that's Anne Shaw's team, on the post-COVID recovery programme strategy. We've had the overhead slides, which is good because it's easier for us to follow than maybe it's on the screen, but it's on the screen anyway. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Anne couldn't be with us today, unfortunately, because she's having a well-deserved day of annual leave. So I've come to sort of present where we've got to in terms of how we're going to look sort of forward, really, especially around sort of the marketing sort of side of stuff, to hopefully be able to rebuild the network sort of back into through that sort of recovery phase. I just want to check, can everybody see the slides on the screen? Yeah, okay, brilliant. So I think, sorry about this, I think I've actually got the wrong set of slides up there. Just bear with me 1 minute. This is the ones that I want. Apologies about that. Right, so I'll begin. Sorry about that. So the challenge, obviously, that we face sort of as we come out of the sort of lockdowns and the various social distancing measures that we've had in place now for, well, by the time they end, will be well over a year. I think, obviously, you've probably heard lots of updates today around sort of the state of the network at the minute and the various things that have been looked at in the background. But obviously, the key sort of impacts around COVID-19 have very much been around the unimaginable lows in passenger numbers across the network, and even the amount of vehicles that will be travelling on the highways network. We don't currently have any fixed dates for the release of social distancing, but we're certainly working towards that sort of summer and autumn sort of period. So we want to really try and do as much information now, or get as many things ready as we possibly can now, so that we can be really quick and agile when we do get that sort of release, hopefully later this year. Passenger confidence in public transport has been, really hit. So, we need to really rebuild that as part of what we do in recovery. And if we don't get that confidence back, then congestion across the road network could come back even worse. We've also got a bit of an unknown. There's a lot of businesses obviously moved to a more agile working, including our own. And actually, it's possible that many of those businesses will continue to do that. So we may never see that kind of Monday to Friday, 5-day-a-week commuter return. So actually, how are we going to, work to that? How are we going to flex the system to be able to cope with that sort of response as well? The planning teams have obviously been looking at various different scenarios. Now, the top two there, the sort of coasting and hoping scenarios, even with all the will in the world and a good economic comeback, even they show, a slightly 10% to 20% reduction of public transport use when, within 12 to 18 months of getting that social distancing released. Now, that's with us doing as much as we possibly can to obviously get there too. So the sort of stuff that I'm going to talk through, a lot of the rest of this today is really, really important, we feel, to actually, hopefully get us to those sorts of two scenarios. And as you can see on the bottom tier there, the least favourable scenarios are not something we could ever wish for to be happening. So we really feel this is a really important piece of work for us to tackle over the next few months and get right. We've also got the long-term strategy from the CA, decarbonising the West Midlands, and also TfWM is going through a whole piece at the moment, sort of revising the local transport plan, which all of it's going to set out that greener and cleaner travel future. Now, this is probably our biggest opportunity we've got now to really try and embed some of these sort of behavioural changes, and that's what we really want to focus the recovery sort of around. So we've set a sort of quite a few high-level goals here. Now, this is all very much in the early sort of stages of planning. So we just wanted to share with you sort of today and get some feedback at the end. These are all sort of open to change, and there might be things we've missed that we haven't quite picked up yet. So, please just see that it's a sort of work in progress on that point of view. But regaining trust is a key thing, increasing patronage so the network becomes commercially viable again, improving the air quality and decarbonising travel, encouraging more active travel, but also making sure it's integrating with the other modes, not kind of replacing public transport journeys, and obviously reducing congestion on the network. We're obviously continuing to build lots of new, new infrastructure and building that capacity that was always in our long-term plans from before. So again, there's lots of things happening across this year that really, we can drive people to be coming back to public transport once again. So the recovery programme, and again, this is still a bit of a work in progress, but the sort of six key sort of areas that we're looking at. So we need a network that obviously works for the people and the residents out there. We need to make sure that it's taking people to all the right places and the right services, and where people might be moving around slightly differently or looking to do new leisure type things. All that needs to be considered as part of the way we rebuild the network. The products are obviously really key as well, and that includes things like ticketing, promotion, which is what I'm really going to talk to you more about today as this presentation sort of moves on. But obviously then we need to be making sure customers are getting that reliable service and the customer continues to be at the heart of everything we're doing. And then any interventions that we're doing, we need to make sure that they're being designed by data, and that that we've had lots of success throughout the year monitoring the network in a much more real-time sort of fashion than we ever have done before. So it's continuing that and then using that data to continue to improve the services, and that they all sort of cross between each other. But at the same time, there's lots of things that we need to do in all those areas.
Yeah.
A combined effort for an integrated network is what we're really looking to do. We've seen the transport community over the last 12 months really pull together. So we really want to do that again. So we want to make sure the programme that we're putting together is fully multimodal and it supports that integration across the network. It's not about competing modes, it's about how the network works as one. So again, we're going to need support from operators, local authorities, national partners, and obviously all the delivery partners that are still out there delivering some of these big schemes. As I mentioned, the key thing really here is changing behaviour, and this is, the time is really now. So there's a bit of theory around behaviour change, which hopefully you'll all be aware of, but just in case anybody isn't, it's very much around, encouraging people to sort of contemplate what they're going to do, how they could change, giving them those nudges that will then actually make them start preparing for that, move people into then a bit of an action phase, whether they decide, that's where they've decided, right, I'm going to do this. But obviously, once they do that, then they've got to have that smooth and simple experience, and then actually be able to maintain that going forward. It's quite difficult. Now, COVID-19, I think, as we'll all sort of recognise, as broken those travel habits of a generation. And that's what, when we talk about behaviour change, there's only normally key sort of moments in life where people are really susceptible to behaviour change, and that's normally things like marriage or moving house. But actually, COVID-19 has really given us that opportunity where we've broken everybody's travel habits. So let's try and rebuild them back in a slightly different way to what we've done before. And this is where sort of the whole RC4 element around promotion, so comms and engagement and marketing, at scale and really driven by that data intelligence, can really inform, persuade, and embed new habits. And they're going to meet our goals then, hopefully, cleaner and greener transport future that we're looking for. We need to do this quickly as measures are lifted, and change does take time. So, once we kind of get that green light, or we know in advance if that's going to happen, that's to the time we've really got to go, and we've got to go big. The message needs to be long term, it needs to be multi-layered, and it's got to be adaptable as well, because we will see some areas may respond to certain messages in a certain way, other areas may do differently. So, we're not taking anything off the table. We want to keep and create as many different approaches as we can, and keep testing those until we really see them work. So what we're really proposing as part of this sort of promotion area is to sort of really set a new strategic sort of approach or model to the whole way that TFWM and partners sort of do marketing of the network. Now here you'll see the big sort of purple umbrella at the top. That's going to be very much what we call sort of that umbrella campaign, and it's going to be a really big broadcast piece, which is very much around, informing about the network, that it's open, it's available, it's reliable, it's clean, it's safe, and really showing the lifestyle that people can have by switching to public transport and to using active travel modes. Then the four sort of pillars then that sit underneath that, the red sort of box really covers the operator sort of perspective, and that allows, hopefully, with us looking at the whole lifestyle piece across the top, that allows operators to really do what they do best, and that's promoting their own services, their own frequencies, their own price points, and to the customers that are most likely to use them, and that'll hopefully give them much more cost-effective promotion back. Obviously, they're all pretty struggling, or will be struggling certainly as we move into the future. So it's kind of doing what we can to support them, and each of us taking our own role, in the recovery of the network. We'll also then look to do sort of active travel campaigns. And the travel demand management campaigns will continue as well around the big disruptive events like HS2. And obviously, both of those then, continue to nudge people and encourage people to do something different. And they're all part of that integrated network, and they're all part of getting people to do the behaviour change bit. And then the blue box, the second one in the column there, that's what we're sort of going to badge as sort of corridor campaigns or intervention campaigns. And that's where, as that data comes through a bit further down the line, and we start to see certain areas are not responding like others, that's where we can start to do more targeted activity, really get localized in their hyper-local community channels. And just to kind of, again, don't take these dates here, how we've set this out as gospel. We've just sort of tried to lay it out just so you could see sort of how all the four columns sort of fit in with that overarching recovery campaign. So if we say had social distancing released at June, we'd launch that recovery campaign, operators can start doing their elements. Then a little bit further down the line toward later in the year, the corridor campaigns will come in. But obviously the TDM and the active travel pieces are ongoing from now, and they would continue to run as well in the background. But it's very much about trying not to have too many, confusing people with too many messages from too many people. If we kind of, if we don't put some sort of organisation into this, then every operator, every mode, ourselves, we're all just going to be out there shouting the same kind of messages at people, instead of actually trying to take people on a journey through that behaviour change cycle. We also feel people are a little bit tired of being told what to do. So let's show them a new way of travel. Let's show them something different. How we can reconnect people back into the communities that they've been missing and they haven't been able to see over the last sort of 12 to 18 months, as it will be at that time. Travel independence doesn't have to be car ownership, especially in the urban environment like the West Midlands. How 2 wheels and 2 feet really benefit that sort of one mind, one heart, and the well-being of people, and actually the health and mental benefits, that really come from that. And also, that the network is there, it delivers all day, every day. It's not as, it's not that perception that people have out there isn't actually correct. And, it's been there every day for people through this pandemic, and it will continue to be there every day for everybody going forward. I think that's a really key message we need to sort of share to people too. And just the final point there then as well is definitely just showing people that sort of, how decarbonising travel is going to protect the communities of the future from the climate change element. Yeah. So just very quickly, I'm just going to just take a slightly deeper dive into that umbrella campaign, as that's going to be the key element we feel TFWM needs to sort of focus on and deliver. As I mentioned, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to rebuild those broken habits, and we need a once-in-a-lifetime campaign to actually match that. It needs to be something that's far-reaching, lots of repetition to really progress that behavioural change. But the key thing as well, it's going to be at scale. Now, we have like 4.5 million people pretty much in the travel to work area as a whole, 2.9 of them as residents of West Midlands. To existing budgets that we have in TFWM, etc., even if we put them all together just for this one piece of campaigning, it wouldn't touch anywhere near that, those sorts of numbers. So we're looking at ways now of looking at opportunities where we can try and source some additional funding, whether that's from government or other sources. And that's a bit of work we need to do now over the next few months, really, to try and source enough funding to do this campaign at the scale it sort of needs. And just so you kind of get a better understanding of what that campaign would look like, it would very much about repetition, minimum of 6 months, but ideally 12 to 18 months. It needs to be, quite bold, unapologetic, to really get the story across. There's been a huge piece of work done on our new persona framework, which is really how we sort of can take groups of people, look at them and understand, what they'd be receptive to, what they would, what kind of channels and spaces they sort of operate in. So then we can kind of pick which TV, radio, out of home and all that sort of digital stuff that we can do to really target them. The key point for me as well, and I know for quite a lot of my team members as well, is very much around using faith and local community groups too. And these really hyper-local channels that have been, sort of have sprung up in lots of sort of areas and all various different communities. As we really feel we need to get the message out to, these harder to reach groups, we really need them to start acting and doing something different on this as well. And then there can be lots of other things as well, like, what flash mobs and guerrilla marketing tactics, where we can actually probably hopefully as well bring in some of the hospitality sector, which has also been affected really badly, and the leisure industries, to actually kind of do a bit of cross-promotional sort of piece, get them to sort of really put on a big show for us. Obviously link it into transport, but actually, people have got to use transport to get to these services or these leisure opportunities that they may have missed. The other just part of that as well is just really using the media in a slightly different way. We really want to make sure, we're selling the stories of change and actually really encouraging people to do something different off the back of that. So just to cover off some of the next steps, sort of through January and now into February, we've been doing that whole sort of socialisation piece. We've been to various meetings like today, to sort of, get some input and feedback. And then we'll sort of move into the campaign development, user testing side of stuff. And hopefully then, by June time, we'll have a really refined sort of product or, a campaign that's ready to go once we get that green light. Now, there is other areas of the programme as well, which need some work that we've sort of started looking at this one in particular, this sort of area of the programme, it's quite important. But we'll also be looking over the next month or so to get kind of more programme support, project support, and opening this up then to a much wider sort of user base across TFWM and operators. And I just want to leave you that sort of parting comment. Really, just the risk of doing nothing could be a bigger threat to our network than the pandemic itself. And I just really wanted to obviously listen to anybody's feedback today, if anybody had any questions or things that they want us to take away to really focus on sort of in the next stages of this. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. Well, since we have no other business to discuss apart from the two combined authority reports under the private section, are there any questions on this? It's good to see that we're sort of going ahead of ourselves, and every cloud there's a silver lining and all that. Are there any comments, questions? Well, you've got Andrew's name now. Please do get in touch with him to give any ideas or query anything. But it is good to see that this sort of vision is being worked up and kind of action, I must say.
Good,
okay,
good.
well, thank you, Andrew. Cheerio. Thank you. That's noted. Thank you. No, item 13 isn't really an item. It's just going to be circulated as a bang up to date bus recovery briefing for us all. We have no notices of no motion, no questions as such. We look at the forward plan. We will be filling that in, and I think once we have a clear definition of our role and working practices, we can develop a regular forward plan, obviously with room for contingency issues which may occur along the way. Right, where are we now? Date of the next meeting is the 15th of March. That will be the last of this financial year. Yeah. I now must